Okay, let's just dive right in. The Bible. For so many people, it's this source of incredible wisdom and comfort. But for a whole lot of others, it's just confusing. How can one book have both these beautiful passages about love, and then, on the other hand, brutal violence, often commanded by what seems to be the same God? So today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating argument from our source material that says there might be a single key to unlocking this whole puzzle. Our source text really doesn't pull any punches. It gets right to the heart of it. It asks the big question: how do we square a God of love and grace with passages that talk about, the total destruction of cities or a worldwide flood? It's a tough question, and it's one that people have been wrestling with for centuries. And this is really the central conflict we have to face. It's not comfortable, but it's an honest question. How do you make these two seemingly opposite ideas fit together? Is it even possible? Or do you just have to pick one and kind of ignore the other? Well, this exact problem leads a lot of people to see the Bible not as one single story, but more like a book with a split personality, especially when you look at the character of God. I'm sure you've heard this before, right? The common idea is that the God of the Old Testament is all about wrath, judgment, and super strict laws. And then the God of the New Testament, who we see in Jesus, is all about love, mercy, and grace. It almost feels like you're talking about two totally different characters. But what if that gap isn't as huge as it looks? What if there's actually a bridge connecting these two testaments, a big idea hidden in plain sight? Our source text argues that there is, and it's found way deeper than just looking at fulfilled prophecies. So here, the source text basically says, yeah, we know there's this historical divide, but there's a much deeper unity to be found. The author suggests we have to get past just connecting the dots on the surface and ask a way more fundamental question: who is God? And the answer, they say, is all about the very being of God. And this is where things get really interesting. And that investigation takes us to one of the most iconic scenes in the entire Old Testament, a moment that our source says is the absolute key to this whole theological puzzle. So picture this. Moses is at the burning bush. He's just been given this massive, impossible job, and he asks a really simple but profound question. If I go to the people, who do I say sent me? He's asking for a name, and the answer he gets is one that's going to echo through all of Scripture. This is it. I am who I am. It sounds so cryptic, doesn't it? Almost like a riddle or a non-answer. But according to our source, this isn't a description or a title. It's a statement about the fundamental nature of reality itself. Okay, so this is the absolute core of the argument. The author argues that God isn't defined by attributes, like powerful or wise or even loving. Instead, God's very essence, God's being, is the act of existence. God doesn't just have existence, God is existence. It's a little bit of a mind-bender for sure, but it's the foundation for everything else that's coming. Now, let's see how this idea starts to build, because that one phrase from the Old Testament doesn't just sit there. Our source points out a pretty stunning echo of it centuries later, in the Garden of Gethsemane. And this just lays out the connection so brilliantly. When the guards come to arrest Jesus and they ask for him by name, his reply in the original Greek is ego eimi, which literally translates to I am. The source points out that this is the very same phrase used in the Greek version of God's declaration to Moses. And get this, the effect is the same too. The soldiers just fall to the ground, totally overwhelmed, just like Moses was in awe at the burning bush. So the implication here is massive, and it's crystal clear. The author is arguing this isn't some coincidence. It's the exact same declaration of divine being, the same fundamental nature of pure existence, coming from two different figures in two different testaments. So this shared identity, this shared essence of just being, becomes the thread that starts to tie the entire biblical story together. It starts to dissolve that contradiction we were talking about between the two testaments. And the argument doesn't stop there. The author goes on to show how other writers in the New Testament picked up this idea and ran with it. They describe Jesus not just as a messenger from God, but as the actual image and essence of that same divine being that spoke to Moses from the bush. So you see how it all connects. This becomes the unifying thread. Jesus is called the Word that was God. He's called the image of the invisible God. And according to our source, it all points to one conclusion. Christ's being is the same as God's being, which is simply to exist. It's one God, one essence.
The personality isn't changing, just the context and the way it's expressed.
So, what does all this mean for us as readers? It means this concept isn't just some abstract theological idea. It's actually a practical tool, like a new lens for reading and maybe making sense of the whole text. And I love this insight from the author. They point out that the Bible itself seems to know that it has difficult parts. This isn't just a modern reader's problem. The text knows it's complex. So this key we're talking about isn't some external fix we're applying. It's presented as a way of understanding that's found inside the text itself. So the bottom line is this. This way of thinking doesn't make the violent passages just disappear, and it's definitely not about excusing them. Instead, it invites us to see them in a totally different light. If God's fundamental nature is existence itself, just pure reality, then maybe these difficult moments aren't about human-like anger or cruelty. Maybe they're being presented as the huge, even terrifying, consequences of opposing that fundamental reality. It reframes the whole conflict from one of emotion to one of being itself. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If understanding a single phrase, I am, as the essence of being, can reframe the entire Bible, what other deep contradictions in ancient texts and philosophies could be unlocked if we just found the right unifying idea at their core? Makes you think, doesn't it?